The room had gone completely silent, so silent that even the ticking clock on the far wall sounded like thunder. 14 interpreters had already tried and failed. The deal that could change thousands of lives was slipping through trembling fingers, word by broken word. Oh. Frustration hung thick in the air, eyes darted with desperation, and billion-dollar decisions teetered on the edge of collapse. And then, from the corner of the room, a quiet voice said something no one expected, something that would change everything. Before we step into this unforgettable moment, take a second. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and hidden potential, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be heard. The International Conference Room was grand, polished, and intimidating. Delegates from 8 different countries sat around a massive oval table, their expressions tense, their patience worn thin. This wasn't just another business meeting. This was a humanitarian agreement meant to deliver clean water and infrastructure to struggling regions across continents. Millions of lives depended on it. But despite the importance, the meeting was falling apart because no one could understand each other. Each interpreter brought in had been highly qualified, experienced, even decorated. But the complexity of the situation was beyond simple translation. Cultural nuances, idioms, dialect shifts, everything was getting lost. What one leader meant as compromise sounded like insult to another. What was intended as urgency came across as aggression. Every attempt to fix the misunderstanding only made things worse. One by one, the interpreters stepped down, defeated, embarrassed, exhausted. In the back of the room, unnoticed by most, a man in a gray janitor's uniform quietly pushed his cleaning cart along the wall. His name was Daniel Reyes. To everyone there, he was invisible. Just another worker maintaining the building. No one noticed how he paused when certain words were spoken, how his eyes flickered with recognition, how his hands tightened around the handle of his cart. Daniel wasn't supposed to be in that room, but the chaos had delayed the cleaning schedule, and he had been told to quietly do his work without disturbing anyone. And so he moved carefully, respectfully, keeping his head down. But inside him, something was stirring. The arguments escalated, voices grew loud. Delegate slammed his hand on the table. Another stood up abruptly, shaking his head in frustration. The deal was minutes away from complete failure. And then something unexpected happened. A phrase was spoken, one that had been mistranslated multiple times. It was a critical sentence, one that could determine whether trust remained or shattered completely. The interpreter hesitated, fumbled, and delivered yet another flawed version. Daniel closed his eyes for a brief moment. He knew that phrase. He knew what it truly meant. He had heard it before, not in a classroom, not from a textbook, but from life itself. Before anyone could stop him, before he could even second-guess himself, Daniel stepped forward slightly and spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried clarity. It carried truth. And suddenly, everything changed. The room froze again, but this time it wasn't from failure. It was from shock. Because for the first time that day, the sentence made sense. Heads turned toward him. Confusion spread across faces. Who was this man? How did he know? Why did his words feel right? Daniel hesitated, realizing all eyes were now on him. He wasn't supposed to speak. He wasn't supposed to be seen. But something inside him refused to step back. He spoke again. This time he didn't just translate. He interpreted. He explained the intention behind the words, the cultural weight they carried, the emotion hidden between syllables. And as he did, the tension in the room began to loosen, just slightly. One delegate responded in another language. Without pause, Daniel translated again, then another, and another, and another. Within minutes, the man who had been invisible became the center of the room. Daniel Reyes, the janitor, was speaking 8 languages, fluently, effortlessly. But what stunned everyone even more was not just his ability to translate words, it was his ability to connect people. He didn't just repeat sentences, he bridged understanding. He softened harsh phrases, clarified intentions, and restored meaning where it had been lost. The meeting resumed, but now something was different. The hostility had faded. The confusion had cleared. For the first time that day, progress was being made, and Daniel stood there, still in his janitor's uniform, guiding the conversation that 14 professionals couldn't. But behind his calm voice was a story no one in that room knew, a story of struggle, sacrifice, and silent resilience. Daniel had not always been a janitor. Years ago, he had been a student with big dreams. Languages fascinated him, not just the words, but the cultures behind them. He worked hard, learned tirelessly, and earned a scholarship to study linguistics. His future had looked bright, but life had other plans. Eek! A sudden tragedy changed everything. His wife passed away unexpectedly, leaving him alone with a newborn daughter. Dreams had to be set aside. Survival became the priority. Daniel took whatever job he could find. Cleaning offices, working night shifts, doing anything to keep food on the table. But he never let go of his passion. Late at night, after his daughter fell asleep, he would study old books, free online resources, borrowed materials, anything he could access. Language became his escape, his strength, his connection to a world beyond his struggles. Years passed. His daughter grew. And Daniel remained unseen until this moment. Back in the conference room, the deal was coming together piece by piece. Trust was being rebuilt. Smiles began to replace frowns. And through it all, Daniel stood steady, translating not just words, but hope. Hours later, the agreement was signed. Applause filled the room. It was done. Lives would be changed. But as the delegates celebrated, Daniel quietly stepped back, ready to return to his cart, to fade back into the background where he believed he belonged. But this time, someone noticed. One of the lead organizers approached him, eyes filled with disbelief and respect. Questions followed. How did you learn? Where did you study? Why are you working here? Daniel answered simply, no exaggeration, no pride, just truth. And the truth moved them, because greatness had been standing in front of them all along, and they had almost missed it. In the days that followed, Daniel's life began to change in ways he never imagined. Offers came, opportunities opened, his story spread. But the most important moment wasn't the recognition or the career shift or the financial stability that finally followed. It was the look in his daughter's eyes when she realized who her father truly was, not just a janitor, but a man who never gave up. A man who turned pain into purpose. A man who proved that no matter where life places you, your worth remains unchanged. If this story is touching your heart right now, take a moment to like, comment, and share. Stories like Daniel's remind us that greatness often hides in the most unexpected places. And before we reach the end, here's something special. Comment below. I believe in second chances. Let's fill this space with hope and positivity, because sometimes the world overlooks people, but that doesn't mean they are ordinary. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the loudest truth. Sometimes the person cleaning the floor is the one who can lift everyone else higher. Daniel didn't step forward for recognition. He stepped forward because it was the right thing to do. And in doing so, he didn't just save a deal. He changed his life and reminded the world that kindness, resilience, and hidden talent can rewrite even the hardest stories. If this story moved you, even a little, don't scroll away. Engage with it. Share it. Let it reach someone who needs to hear it today. Because you never know, the next ordinary person you pass by might just be extraordinary. The applause that followed the signing of the agreement was loud, proud, and historic. But for Daniel Reyes, it felt distant, almost unreal, like he was watching someone else's life unfold from the outside. He slipped out of the conference room quietly, his heart still racing, his hands trembling slightly. The same hands that had just bridged nations now reached for the worn handle of his cleaning cart. The same voice that had carried clarity and confidence returned to silence. He walked down the long hallway, the echo of polished shoes replacing the echo of applause, because for years that was his place, unnoticed, unheard, unseen. But something had changed, not just in that room, inside him. That night, Daniel returned home later than usual. The small apartment was dimly lit, the soft hum of a fan filling the silence. His daughter, Sophia, had fallen asleep on the couch, a half-finished homework notebook resting on her chest. A small lamp cast a warm glow across her face, and for a moment Daniel just stood there, watching her. Everything he had ever done, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every quiet struggle, had been for her. He gently lifted the notebook, placed it on the table, and covered her with a thin blanket. As he brushed a strand of hair away from her forehead, she stirred slightly. Her eyes opened just enough to see him, and in a sleepy voice she whispered something that hit him deeper than anything that had happened that day. She told him she was proud of him. Daniel froze, because she didn't know. She didn't know what had happened at the conference. She didn't know about the deal, the languages, the applause. She just knew him, the man who worked hard, who came home tired, who still found time to help her with school and read her stories at night. And yet, she was proud. That single moment meant more than any recognition in that conference room ever could. But the world outside was already beginning to catch up. The next morning, Daniel's life shifted again. He arrived at work expecting everything to be the same quiet corridors, the same routine, the same invisibility. But as soon as he stepped inside the building, something felt different. People were looking at him, not past him, at him. Whispers followed him down the hallway. A few employees nodded in respect. Someone even smiled and said good morning, something that had never happened before. Daniel felt out of place, almost uncomfortable, until he was called into the administrative office. His first thought was fear. Had he done something wrong? Was he in trouble for speaking during the meeting? But when he stepped inside, the atmosphere was anything but negative. The same organizers from the conference were there, along with a few unfamiliar faces, people in suits, people who carried authority in the way they stood and spoke. They invited him to sit, and then they began to talk. They spoke about what he had done, about how he had saved not just the deal, but the relationships behind it. They explained how critical his understanding had been, not just of language, but of human emotion, culture, and intention. Then came the question that would define the next chapter of his life. Why had someone like him been working as a janitor? Daniel answered the same way he always did, with honesty. He told them about his wife, about the night everything changed, about holding his newborn daughter and realizing that dreams would have to wait, about choosing stability over ambition, survival over passion. He didn't tell it like a tragedy. He told it like reality, and somehow that made it even more powerful. There was a long silence after he finished. Not awkward. Respectful, because everyone in that room understood that they were sitting in front of someone extraordinary, not because of what he had done yesterday, but because of everything he had endured for years without recognition. Then came the offer, not just a job, a chance. They offered him a position as a professional interpreter for international negotiations, training, support, a proper salary, everything he had once dreamed of but never had the opportunity to pursue. Daniel didn't respond immediately, because for him, this wasn't just about success. It was about risk. Accepting meant stepping into a completely different world, a world he had once belonged to but had been away from for so long. It meant change, uncertainty, and the fear of failing at something that now mattered more than ever. But then he thought about Sophia, about the life he wanted to give her, about the example he wanted to set. And slowly he said yes. The transition wasn't easy. Daniel struggled at first, not with languages, but with confidence. Years of being invisible had a way of shaping how you see yourself. Even when others believed in him, he had to learn to believe in himself again. There were moments of doubt, moments where he felt like he didn't belong, moments where the weight of expectations felt overwhelming. But each time he remembered that conference room, he remembered the silence. The failure, and the moment he stepped forward anyway, that memory became his strength. Weeks turned into months. Daniel grew into his new role, not just as an interpreter, but as a bridge between worlds. His ability to understand people, not just words, made him invaluable. He wasn't just translating languages anymore. He was translating humanity. And at home, life began to change too. Sophia noticed it first. The late nights were still there, but they felt different. There was less exhaustion, more purpose. There were smiles where there used to be quiet worry. And one evening, as Daniel helped her with her homework, she asked him something simple but powerful. She asked him how many languages he knew. Daniel smiled, and instead of giving her a number, he began to teach her. Because this wasn't just his journey anymore. It was theirs. Years later, Daniel would stand in rooms far bigger than that first conference. He would help negotiate agreements that shaped policies, improved lives, and brought people together across borders. But no matter how far he went, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the cleaning cart. The long nights, the quiet struggles, because those weren't just hardships, they were the foundation of who he became. And one day he returned to that same building, not as a janitor, but as a guest speaker. He stood in front of a new group of employees, many of whom were just starting their own journeys. And as he looked around, he saw something familiar. He saw people who felt unseen, people who felt stuck, people who believed their current situation defined their future. And he told them what he had learned the hard way, that your circumstances don't define your potential, that the world may overlook you, but that doesn't mean you are not valuable. That sometimes the right moment comes when you least expect it. And when it does, you have to be brave enough to step forward, because that one moment can change everything. So if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, don't just keep it to yourself. Like the video, share it, and leave a comment. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need hope, because somewhere out there, someone is standing quietly in the corner of their own life, waiting for their moment, just like Daniel once did. And when that moment comes, everything can change.